On behalf of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Administration for Community Living, and the Indian Health Service, I would like to welcome everyone to the Long-Term Services and Support webinar series. My name is Amanda Fox, and I work for Kaufman & Associates. I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers of Veterans. Before we begin, I would like to highlight the main features of your webinar interface. First is the main window where you see the PowerPoint slides to the left of your screen. To the bottom right of the window is the Q&A pod. You can enter a question for our presenters at any time in the Q&A pod. A Q&A session will take place after the presentation. If you need technical assistance during the webinar, please enter your tech support question in the Q&A pod. Our tech support staff will be monitoring these questions throughout the webinar and will work to answer your tech support questions right away. You'll receive an answer in the Q&A pod. Finally, please be aware that today's webinar is being recorded and that the recordings will be made available online in the near future on cms.gov. Please note this webinar series is supported by a contract awarded by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Department of Health and Human Services or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Our presenter today joins us from the United States Department of Veteran Affairs National Caregiver Support Program. Elsie Moore is a licensed clinical social worker and has been with the National Caregiver Support Program for 1.5 years. As one of the training and education program managers, she works on behalf of our veterans caregivers and with community partners. Ms. Moore received her social work master's degree from the University of Alabama in 1994. As a part of her graduate work, Ms. Moore completed a VA social work internship at Tuscaloosa VA Medical Center and developed an interest in caring for veterans and their families. While most of Ms. Moore's 25 years in the federal government was spent at the Washington, D.C. VA Medical Center serving veterans and their families, she also worked at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland for almost 5 years. I will now turn it over to Ms. Moore to introduce today's topic.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction. Also, thank you for allowing me to speak with you today about the VA Caregiver Support Program. The focus on this presentation is to provide an overview of the Caregiver Support Program, highlighting the program's foundation, the 2 programs especially that we have administered under the program, discuss the unique services available to family caregivers who care for the eligible veteran, and provide resources. I'm very excited to share details about our program, but I'm also equally interested in hearing from you about your thoughts and questions. And I just want to mention if there's anything that I'm unable to answer today, we will get back to you, and I'm also happy to share information up to leadership. So November is a pretty busy month, and first I would like to recognize Native American Heritage Month. It's truly amazing that there are so many rich and beautiful cultures to know and to learn about. Also, I'd like to wish all of our veterans a belated Happy Veterans Day and month. And finally, this is also National Family Caregivers Month. So really want to also acknowledge all the family caregivers out there. In my preparation for today's webinar, I was really not surprised to read that understanding benefits for veterans and their family members was one of the tribe's top priorities from the 2016 tribal consultation. And, these are things that we hear about all the time that people need more of. So I'm especially glad to be here today sharing with you about the program. So the VHA Caregiver Support Program mission is to promote the health and well-being of family caregivers who care for our nation's veterans throughout education, resources, support, and services. We're invested in supporting the family caregivers. It's a personal sacrifice when someone is taking care of another person, and so it's especially important to our veterans. The VA has an array of services to to provide support services to the caregiver in their role. We have 4 pillars that kind of create the foundation of our program, and that in and of itself can be a whole nother presentation, so I'm going to try to keep this a little bit more brief. But those are inclusive care, education and training, trusted partnership, and service excellence. So again, I'm just going to briefly review those. Inclusive care is about integrating the caregiver into the fabric of the VA as a valued customer and also as an integral member of the veterans care team. And so it's important that we're collaborating, increasing that communication and participation between the caregiver and the providers at the VA, facilitating or coordinating access to services and benefits for caregivers, and empowerment, which is to promote a strengths-based approach to foster the caregiver's knowledge and confidence in their capabilities. And so education and training is key to delivering the knowledge and skills to the family caregivers. It's also key that we're educating our VA providers, because everybody sort of has their own expertise, but sometimes they miss pieces of the puzzle, and that's a large part of what we do, is to kind of bring all that together, connect the dots, and help people navigate to the right things. So we do a lot of work with development of education and information communication, and also doing outreach and creating awareness. Trusted partnership, that probably kind of says just what it sounds like. And basically advocating, creating and vetting partnerships. Is just like the caregiver cannot do it alone, the VA cannot do it alone either. We need our partners to provide as many services and resources to people as possible, to both the veterans and the caregivers. And service excellence, again, sometimes research and all that stuff may sound a little boring, but it's really important to have consistent and best practices. And so it's important to have research and policy development kind of based on all of those things. And we want to make sure that quality assurance is involved with our program, and that we're evaluating things and constantly improving and meeting people's needs. This slide is, we've been calling it the bubble chart because of all the bubbles or circles. And we were making an effort to find a way to sort of explain our program in one slide or one sort of handout. It's a very complex program, but I'll just briefly go over this because we are going to get more into this. The large circle you see, the Program of General Caregiver Support Services, has a list of things there: training, education, building better caregivers, caregiver support lines, and so on. And so that is really the large part of our program. Many more people are going to be eligible for that program than the other program, and so we want to make sure that people are well aware of it. It has just as many important things to take advantage of as the other program does, and we want to make sure people don't sort of undermine it and think that it doesn't have anything to offer. We really want to highlight and spotlight that program for general caregiver support. And then the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers is within the larger circle, because it provides all those larger circle items or lists. And then in addition to those, it also provides a monthly stipend and access to CHAMP VA health care if the person's eligible, if they don't have health care, mental health counseling, caregiver training, and some other things. Off to the left, you'll see 5 smaller circles, such as home telehealth, respite care, home hospice care, choose home, veteran-directed care, adult daycare. These are things that basically a veteran may be eligible for, whether they're in the program or not. So, of course, if they're eligible, we want them to be in the caregiver program, but these are groups that we work with. They're under geriatric, they're under geriatric and extended care largely, but we work with several different groups, several different offices within the VA system to provide all the services that we do. I also want to mention that caregiver support coordinators are probably one of our best resources of all, and they are our field representatives. There's at least one at every VA medical center, and now, honestly, the programs are growing, so they very well may have anything from 1 to 3, and they're growing even more than that. They could have anything from 3 to 5 or 6, even more, because we are expanding. We're expecting to take in a lot more applications, and so we're preparing for that, but also we're expecting to take on more folks in the general caregiver program. So if you don't take anything else away from this program today, please remember that there's a caregiver support coordinator at each VA, and they can help answer your questions, they can help connect you, they can help you kind of navigate the system. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the general caregiver support services, and this is for enrolled veterans of all eras. A general caregiver is defined as a person who provides personal care services to a veteran who needs assistance with one or more activities of daily living for an ADL, or needs supervision and protection based on symptoms or residuals of neurological care or other impairment or injury. And this is a very important piece, because I think people may forget this frequently. This program may also be for veterans who are taking care of someone else. So the veteran does not have to be the person receiving the caregiving. They can be giving the care to someone else, whether it's a family member or friend or whatever the case may be. So they can benefit from this education and training and support from the Caregiver Support Program as well. Also, I want to point out that a caregiver for this program may be a husband, a wife, a parent, a sister, a brother, another family member, a partner, a neighbor, or a close friend. So a caregiver is not just family, but immediate family. So this, again, we're going to be talking more about these, so I'm not going to spend a long time on this particular slide, but just again, resource and referrals. So resources and referrals, education, training, and support, and counseling are things that our program really spends a lot of time on. We are committed to providing these things to caregivers, and we want to find the different ways and make sure that they are aware of the different ways that they can receive these services. I do want to go ahead and mention, in case it's not mentioned later, but with counseling with the general caregiver support services, that it does have to be in connection with the treatment of the veteran's disability. So it's, in other words, it's why the veteran is in the program, the main things that they're receiving treatment for. So it has to be to kind of better their medical treatment, that there is free counseling through the VA if they don't have any other types of insurance that can be of assistance to them. And again, we're going to be talking about these specifically a little bit later, but building better caregivers, the caregiver support line, monthly education calls, Reach VA, which is resources for enhancing all caregivers' health, and these other items are going to be what the caregiver is eligible for in the general program. Okay, and these were mentioned in the 10 circles earlier in the bubble chart, and these are things that are additional support that are available to veterans and can aid in reducing caregiver stress. So we really want to make sure that people don't forget about these potential opportunities. There is likelihood that a veteran would have to meet eligibility for it, but you can reach out to the caregiver support coordinator, you can reach out to a social worker, you can talk to the primary care doctor or somebody on the primary care team about many of these things that may be needed. In many cases, the primary care doctor actually must place a consult or an order for something. So you really do want to make sure your primary care provider knows what your needs are. Okay, and here's a little more about building better caregivers. This is a 6-week online interactive workshop for caregivers of veterans. The workshop assists caregivers with enhancing communication and decision-making, managing caregiver fatigue and stress, improving caregiver sleep, diet, and personal health, and learning ways to cope with caregiver issues. It also engages you in shared experiences because you'll have the opportunity to communicate with other caregivers in the program. And once they're done with this 6-week online workshop, they'll be able to be in an alumni community. So it's just one of the things we've learned is that caregivers, whether they're in a city or in the country or wherever they're located, they can still experience a sense of isolation. They can be very busy with what they're doing. They can be just so sort of enthralled with taking care of the veteran that they really don't take care of themselves or think about their own needs. And slowly but surely, sometimes they can drift away from their own support network. So, just because maybe other people don't understand what they're going through. So this is a great way of building that community or that part of their lives back up. I also like to point out that this, if someone is in a rural scenario where, or just far away from the VA, they, it's not easy to get into the VA for services and resources. So we know this is a problem for a lot of people. If someone does have computer access and internet, this is something that would be perfect for them to take advantage of. And they would just have to go through the Caregiver Support Coordinator for a referral to this program. In addition, I kind of want to point out that, again, we understand not everybody may have phone service, computers, or internet. So to really be creative, and again, probably people are already doing this, but to be creative, reaching out to your own support network. If someone doesn't have that resource at home, maybe their friend or family or neighbor has it that they can build a rapport with if they haven't already, and use it for, certain times to get through and have that type of support that they need. Also, maybe there's a local veteran service organization, a community center, a library, a church, some type of faith-based organization or building that might let them participate using their phone or their computer and internet system service. And so speaking of that, we have the VA Caregiver Support Line, which responds to calls from caregivers, veterans, and community agencies. They're open and available from Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we have VA clinical social workers who are answering these phone calls. So they are clinical providers basically answering these calls. They often are able to give supportive counseling, brief supportive counseling, connect people with resources, educate and explain about the program and specifically. And they can also link callers to the local caregiver support coordinators and explain different ways how to benefit from the website that we have as well. In addition to that, they facilitate telephone education calls. They're basically one a month, so they have 12 unique topics, and they are on topics such as setting boundaries, asking for help, handling the holiday stresses, and managing, anger, whether that be your own or working with somebody who copes, the person you're providing the caregiving, helping them to deal with their anger issues as well. So each topic is offered at 3 different times throughout the month, and that to meet the needs of the people's different schedules, whether it's a work schedule, school schedule, or caregiving schedule. Calls are accessed through the 1-800 number. And again, through the comfort of your own home. And if you don't have the ability, then you can hopefully maybe reach out and connect with somebody that I've listed off earlier, such as a community center or, maybe a government building or library, anywhere that might be able to, you can build a rapport with to do that. Additional caregiver-led calls are also hosted throughout the year to share their personal peer experiences. And I just have to tell you that we're going to talk about the peer support program, but the peer connection is definitely one of the most important things, because when people, they can hear me talking and they can know that, well, maybe I understand a little bit about what they're going through and I have some information to share with them, but it's just a totally different feel when you're able to talk to somebody who's been through it and maybe learn something along the way, and they can share their experiences and their tips. And so all of this is valuable, but it's just a little bit special when it's somebody who's been through what you're going through. And next, we have the resources for enhancing all caregivers' health in VA, which is called Reach VA, and also telephone support. Now, this is different from the one I just mentioned, but I'll explain that in a second. We have Reach VA, which is 4 one-hour core sessions with the option of additional sessions, and that can be done in person or by telephone. And then the telephone support here is listed as delivered in 6 one-hour core group sessions with option of additional sessions if needed. Those are more sort of locally run, and each VA might have a different they may handle it a little bit differently from one VA to the other, but basically these are still, again, good opportunities for people who are not close by, who cannot get back and forth to a local VA. Okay, so both of these support skill building through problem solving, stress reduction, positive thinking, mood management, and the typical curricula focuses on caregivers and veterans with ALS, which is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, dementia, multiple sclerosis, PTSD, and spinal cord injury. And the VA Memphis Caregiver Center and the VA Office of Rural Health have partnered to provide reach to rural caregivers. So again, a lot of emphasis, a lot of extra support trying to be offered out there to the rural caregivers. And we have our caregiver self-care courses. Now, these are done in person. They're offered by trained facilitators from the VA Memphis Caregiver Center, provided in person with caregivers at the local facilities. And they're about 3 hours in length. And the topics include utilizing technology, problem-solving, communication, stress management, taking care of yourself, and as well as your emotional health, medical and emotional health. And so I mentioned the peer support mentoring program. I have to give them kudos. They're just a pretty phenomenal group of folks. They provide such a support to each other, and they're a wealth of wisdom. I know that I can always, if I need to talk to somebody to get some feedback from a caregiver, I know I can go to our peer support mentoring program, because there's always a caregiver who has had great experiences, and not always great experiences, but experiences that they can share, that we can learn from. We want to make sure when we get feedback, it's from people who've actually gone through things. We want them to look at our website and give us feedback about that too. But that's not the primary purpose of it. I just want to point out how important they are to our program and to each other. But the program is about them, again, being a mentor or a mentee to each other. So these are experienced caregivers. They're trained to serve as a mentor, and they're matched up with another person with less experience. They work with a program manager, so they're not kind of just out there doing that on their own. They have a point of contact that they have as a support if they need it as well. They provide personalized guidance based on experience and knowledge. And then you see the word isolation. Again, this is sort of a common theme. It can help with isolation for the mentees. And this is open for caregivers of all eras. So, that doesn't matter which program they're in. And it's really nice, because if somebody who's been a mentee, maybe they've reached a point where they can kind of graduate from that, and maybe now they're interested in being a mentor for someone else. It's a pay it forward kind of situation. So it offers so much to so many. And then we have the website. We have a really involved website, and we're actually revamping it. I think it's probably going to be in its new revamp stage possibly by next week. So if you see it looking differently, don't worry, it's supposed to be doing that. We're trying to make it more customer friendly, so people can easily find the different programs, understand some of the changes that our program is going through, and easily be able to find things like information on the VA program and overall, as well as the different programs, tips by diagnosis, ways to connect with other caregivers, tips and tools, managing medication, talking with medical providers. We have a lot of guidance and information on the website. Publications and resources, how to find your local caregiver support coordinator by state or U.S. territory, and also how to access the application for the program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers. So I mentioned earlier that this is National Family Caregivers Month. In addition to year-round support, which really is done, VA really likes to take the month of November and kind of pile it up with extra information, extra workshops, resource fairs, self-care days, special education, maybe a nice luncheon or breakfast, and community awareness. So it's a time to give extra and make sure that caregivers know that they're cared about and appreciated, and we can't do it without them. It's also a time to really push about caregiving so that people understand and are aware of all that goes into that and the importance of working with caregivers and kind of bringing them into the fold, into the medical team. So I want to bring up a few things. We have, as I mentioned before, we really can't do things without our community partners. So this is incredibly important. We certainly have already had existing partners, and we're involved with creating new ones. We work with so many different people, so I don't really like to mention just one or two. But these are some of the newer things that we've been doing. Working with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation on several different projects. One is called the Campaign for Inclusive Care, which is a cultural transformation initiative with the idea of integrating or to help further integrate caregivers into the healthcare team. And so these are actually going to be modules or training modules that are going to be started in January for providers to take, with the idea of, again, further defining, further describing, explaining sort of what the caregivers go through, how they can benefit us as being part of the medical team, what kind of needs they have so they can de-stress them, and so we can help support them in providing the care that the veterans need, because the veterans are the reason we're there in the first place. Also, there's an experience map. I don't know if you guys have seen anything like that. Sorry, I don't have an example with me, but the military and veteran caregiver experience map is pretty great. I believe there's a veteran map as well, but it basically kind of shows from the point where, maybe the veteran is injured, and then some of the things they go through on the military side to the point that they're discharged from the military retired, and then moving into the VA system and that type of thing. And so in this situation, it shows also kind of what the caregivers' milestones are along with the veterans. And you might wonder why. Well, it's a tool. People can really kind of wrap their heads around something when they can get a better history and understanding of where people come from. And again, you're dealing with a lot of providers, you're dealing with a lot of people who are moving not only fast throughout the day, but through a lot of people and through, you might have people coming through. VA is an educational institution, so we have a lot of opportunity to educate people along the way. So we want to have as many tools as we can to make their experience as good as it can be, and make sure they're prepared for treating veterans and working with their caregivers. Also, the Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention and CSP partnership in terms of a nonprofit social network called Caring Bridge. It's a little bit like Facebook, but it's primarily so you can go online and create, and it's free. And so you can go online and kind of create your own not platform, but page that would allow you to describe your updates on the veterans and where you guys are. Like if you're going through surgeries and you're having to update things, or if you have having a great day and physical therapy is going well, or counseling and your mental health treatment is going well, or whatever it is. If you want to invite your friends and family to that was a good way to keep people up to date, so you're not having to deal with all the phone calls and that type of thing. Also, the expansion of the self-care classes for caregiver partnership with the Memphis Caregiver Center. So this is what we talked about earlier. Again, there's just a big push to emphasize and grow these programs. So this is something that's been in work. A suicide prevention toolkit for caregivers. If you can imagine, if you're working with somebody who has real serious depression or things that make them think of possibly hurting themselves or taking their own life. And not everybody is sort of mentally prepared to handle what do you do with that situation. So this toolkit is in the works. It's supposed to be completed. We wanted to get some feedback from caregivers, which we did in October. And so they're finalizing it, and it's hopefully going to be done by December so it can be disseminated to the local caregiver support programs and caregivers in general. And so I mentioned earlier about Reach VA. Again, an emphasis on the role of caregiver, working in every possibility to increase services, to reach out, to be able to connect with folks who have had difficulty coming in or being able to receive services on hand at the VA. Oops, sorry. Okay, and this is about new technologies. We've been pretty excited about adopting these. We have one that's called Annie Caregiver Support Program. So if someone has a smartphone or smart device and is able to receive text on it, the idea is that they can sign up through their caregiver support coordinator. And it's not really a back and forth communication type of situation. It's more of once they sign up, they're going to receive about 3 messages a week. And these messages can be just anything. It can be something that will help with a stress management tip. It could be something to remind you that you're doing a fantastic job, and and just anything to it's like a positive affirmation too. So that may sound like not much, but as I've mentioned already, if you feel isolated, every little bit counts. So there's a lot of effort to think outside the box in terms of reaching out to caregivers, because we know that even when we set up support groups or outreach events, sometimes caregivers still can't make it. Sometimes veterans still can't make those events. They are very busy. They don't feel good. There's many, many reasons. They're taking care of children. They're taking care of their elderly parents. They have a lot of responsibility. So there's a lot of reasons that maybe they can't reach out to us for services. And this is a nice way that something just, connects with them once they've signed up, even if they're not thinking about it. The VA Video Connect is another thing that is a really big push for our rural veterans and caregivers. In this particular case, the idea is if they're in the Caregiver Support Program, in the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers, we have to do these quarterly monitorings, and this allows the caregiver and the caregiver veteran and the caregiver support coordinator to connect up through Video Connect rather than if they can't get together in person, either at the VA or out to the home. Because we know that we've heard that some people are 3 to 4 hours away from the VA. We know that's not practical. You can't necessarily connect up with everybody on this quarterly basis and get what you need done. So this is a much lower stress way of being able to do that. And then we have the Caregiver Dementia Video Series, which is really a big deal because we know dementia is a tough subject. It's a tough thing to care for. And we actually have 3 new caregiver videos. They're coming out. They're done. I don't think they've been added onto our website yet, so know that they're coming. But there is already a really nice list of caregiver dementia video series. So again, if nothing else, think about the Caregiver Support Coordinator. Think about our website and all the tools that are on the website. And think about the Caregiver Support Line, because they're there to answer your questions. They're there to give you some guidance. Now we're going to talk about the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers in a little more detail. And this offers enhanced clinical support for caregivers of eligible veterans seriously injured in the line of duty on or after September 11, 2001. Veterans may be eligible for this program, and it is a clinical program, if they sustained or aggravated a serious injury in the line of duty on or after 9/11/2001 and require personal care services to perform one or more activities of daily living, or require supervision and protection based on symptoms of residuals of neurological impairment or injury, or require the assistance of a family caregiver to live safely in a home setting. You kind of need to think about it like this. If somebody has to have a caregiver for at a minimum of 6 months in order to be able to stay in their home living environment. So veterans, so the enhanced services that come along with this are the financial stipends, access to CHAMP VA healthcare insurance if the caregiver is otherwise uninsured, mental health counseling. In this case, they don't have the mental health counseling is something they get regardless if it's connected with the veteran's diagnosis. So under the comprehensive program, let's just say that the veteran has issues with, maybe they're an amputee, maybe they have PTSD, they're dealing with these things, and perhaps the caregiver is dealing with grief from a family member passing away. So that's not necessarily connected with their the veteran's issues, but in the mental health counseling under this program, it doesn't matter that it's not connected. They're also eligible for respite care, Hero Miles. Hero Miles is sort of a one-time thing, but it's something that people can get one time in life if they have a family caregiver and, if they're providing care and let's say they have to have surgery or they need a vacation, they need respite, they need a break, their family, their person they need can fly in on these Hero Miles to take their place. So that's a one-time thing. And then also travel and per diem compensation when traveling for a veteran's VA medical appointment. I'm sorry, I think I have to pass up something. I apologize. Okay, no, you're not. Okay, I wanted to bring this up very briefly. I don't know how much folks work with. I don't know how much people work with or familiar with folks who are just coming out of the military, but we have VA staff who are called VA Liaisons, and there's about maybe 42, 43 of them across the country and maybe 22, 24 sites. So they're not located at every military base, but there are several that they're located at. And then there's also some military case managers who also are familiar with our program and can make referrals. So if they are coming out of the military, they can meet up with those folks. They have to generally they have a military retirement that they're going to be taking, but they might be discharging regular and then have specific issues that might make them eligible for the program. So they can reach out. They don't have to wait. If they have a discharge date that they know of, they have an actual retirement date that they is in stone, they can reach out and go ahead and start a referral process. If they're waiting until they get out or whatever the case may be, they can go through the website to learn what they need to do. They can download the application. Both the caregiver and the veteran have to sign and complete the form. They can mail a fax it in. They can send it to our Health Eligibility Center, and they can also send it to the Caregiver Support Coordinator or meet with that person to discuss the case. Okay, we're getting closer to the end, guys, so bear with me. Thanks for listening. So you may have heard of a thing called the Mission Act of 2018. That stands for VA Maintaining Internal Systems and Strengthening Integrated Outside Network. And I'll be honest, I never remember what that is. I just know Mission Act 2018, very big deal. So we're a part of that. Caregiver Support Program is a part of that. And as required, the expansion of the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers will begin when VA has fully implemented a required information technology system. That has to be approved by our VA Secretary as well as certified by Congress. And the timeline for completion and the subsequent certification is in development right now. Per regulation, though, release, we're expecting this to start up summer 2020. That's our target date. And then once the IT system is successfully deployed and the final regulations have been published, the expansion will occur in two phases. First, that will start with eligible veterans who incurred or aggravated a serious injury in the line of duty on or before May 7th, 1975. So that's basically the Vietnam veteran eras and back. And then the final phase of the expansion is anticipated to begin within 2 years, and it will include eligible veterans who incurred or aggravated a serious injury in the line of duty after May 7th, 1975 to September 10, 2001. So again, right now, we are openly accepting applications in the Program of Comprehensive Assistance for Family Caregivers for post-9/11 veterans. And starting in the summer, when you hear from us, when you start to kind of either see it on our website or to hear public relations or communications coming out that we are at that point accepting other applications, that's when you'll know that you can start submitting. We don't take them in advance and hold them in a waitlist kind of setting. That won't be happening, so we'll definitely keep your ears open. So I'm not going to go into a lot of information on this, but I did want to at least touch base. What you see there, I'm not going to read over those, but this is a demographic breakdown of the veterans served in the program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers. That's the stipend program. But these numbers could very easily be off because people, they don't always report what their ethnic or racial group is, or maybe they might claim something different, or they might claim more than one thing. So these numbers are, I would say, more of an estimate. And in terms of the expansion, the Mission Act, I wanted to just give you an idea of some of the readiness that we're preparing, that we're building up. So we're increasing staff. We are having identified coordinator for our program of general caregiver support services, so that we can have a lot more oomph behind that program. We want somebody really committed to that program to build it out even more than it already is. And increase resources and partnerships, which we touched base on. The first phase of the expansion to make more services available to eligible veterans and caregivers. And finally, I thought it was important to kind of address some of the challenges and some of the potential support. The challenges regarding access to care and need for long-term care services and support for American Indian and Alaska Native veterans. I'm sure there's more than these three, but the ones that kind of stood out to me were the long distance from healthcare, lacking transportation, and this kind of cultural sensitivity and respect issues. And what are some of the possible VA supports and resources? Obviously, cultural awareness, care in the community, which came with the Office of Community Care, and that started this past June, and providing more opportunity in the community. Caregiver Support Program resources such as Reach VA and the telephone support, building better caregivers, telehealth and mental health technology. I do know that there are at least some Native American coordinators in certain VAs, and there to help sort of bridge and bring people together a little bit more. But also there are different kinds of peer mentors. And this word has a little bit different meaning. I wanted to put it down so hopefully this isn't confusing. We have our peer mentors, peer support mentors who are caregivers and they're not VA employees in our program, but there are some paid VA peer mentors who are in different kinds of programs, mostly mental health, homeless teens, PTSD-based types of programs, substance abuse programs, and they are there to kind of help people in a different way too. They're sort of like a case manager, but again, they're usually somebody who's been where the veteran is, and so they have a keener idea about what they're going through. Proactive outreach. So again, outreach can be very challenging. Sometimes, it's like you said, it's very far away, and sometimes people just don't come to the outreach event. So those can be challenging, but I think a lot more preparation, a lot more, maybe phone calls ahead to kind of plan for what will make this be a meaningful outreach for people so that they will want to come and receive the resources and information. And home-based primary care and mobile clinics. My understanding is that these do exist and provide quite a nice support to the tribal community. So this is our information. Definitely please hold on to that. And that pretty much brings us to the end. I hope this presentation has given you a sense of how important caregivers are to the VA, how important they are to the veterans. I again want to thank you for allowing me this time. And I would like to hear, I think there's a lot going on in that chat box, so I'd like to see what those questions are. And I'd like to be able to take your feedback to my leadership. And again, if there's something that I can't answer today, then I will be getting back to you. So I need to go ahead and take those questions.
This is our time for questions. Please enter your questions in a Q&A pod located at the bottom right side of your screen. Our first question is, caregiver support, is the beneficiary the caregiver or the veteran?
That's a great question. I would say that the caregiver is, in this case, would be the beneficiary, but the veteran is the one who has to be eligible for the caregiver to be in the program. So, the caregiver, it has to be an enrolled veteran. The person has to be enrolled in the VA system and at least connected and receiving some type of care. And once they are either self-refer or come, complete the application, it depends, either one. The general program or the comprehensive program. However it is they're coming into the program, it will end up being the caregiver who we focus on. It's really it's the main program in the VA system where the caregiver is sort of our main focus.
Our next question is, are all resources presented to the caregiver when they reach out for in-home services?
When you say reach out for in-home services, you mean specifically in-home services, or do you mean any of these types of services? Just want to clarify.
The question asks for in-home services.
Okay. So not necessarily caregiver. I mean, basically, if a person needs in-home services, if they're in our program, they can reach out to the Caregiver Support Coordinator and discuss what their options are. They should also be talking to their primary care provider or clinic nurse, because in-home services can mean different things, right? It can mean a skilled care need. It could also mean sort of traditional home health services, and then they can make a referral for you. But yeah, they should explain what's available in your local area.
Are there any more questions at this time?
I think I saw was if the PowerPoint was going to be available, and it is from my standpoint, and I think you guys are going to be sharing that with them. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. I would like to thank Ms. Moore for joining us today and sharing information about the VA's National Caregivers Program. In closing, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded and that the audio and presentation slides will be made available online at cms.gov on the Tribal LTSS Technical Assistance Center website. Thank you again for joining us for today's webinar. Our session is now concluded.